Nora Bennett, 28. At Thanksgiving dinner, my mother handed out gifts as if she were dealing cards in a game that everyone else had been invited to play. A velvet box went to my sister. A new watch went to my father. My aunt received a spa voucher. My cousin got concert tickets. Even my mother's neighbor's kid, who had only stopped by to drop off a pie, left with a gift bag and a wide grin. Then my mother looked straight past me, reached for the gravy, and said in a casual tone, as if discussing the weather, "Oh, please be grateful you can sit here." My aunt laughed before anyone else and added, "Be glad we still remember your name." That comment broke the room open. Forks paused in the air, shoulders shook with laughter. Someone even slapped the table. I didn't cry. I didn't walk out. I simply folded my napkin, looked around the table as if I were seeing everything clearly for the first time, and said, "Oh, good to know." That should have been the end of the humiliation. It wasn't. Because what people often fail to understand is that moments like that never begin on the holiday itself. They explode. They start years earlier, in smaller rooms, through smaller insults, through hundreds of small decisions that quietly teach one person in a family that they are useful but never truly valued. And 1 week after that dinner, 7 days later, almost to the hour, the same people who had laughed were standing on my Philadelphia doorstep, pounding hard enough to rattle the glass and shouting for me to open the door immediately. Not because they had suddenly found their conscience, not because they missed me, but because something had already begun to fall apart. And for the first time in my life, I allowed it to. Before I explain why they came and what exactly they wanted from me, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I'm always curious about how far stories like this travel. My mother's name is Linda Bennett, my father is Mark, my younger sister is Paige, and the aunt who laughed first that night is Denise Mercer, my mother's older sister, a woman who has spent 20 years turning cruelty into family humor and acting offended whenever anyone points out what it really is. If Thanksgiving had been an isolated incident, maybe I could have ignored it. But that dinner didn't hurt because of the missing gift. It hurt because it made something public that had always been private. In my family, I was never the daughter who was celebrated. I was the daughter who was assigned. Paige received praise, I received errands. Paige heard, "You deserve this." I heard, "You're so capable." When I was 16 and won a statewide design scholarship, my mother missed the ceremony because Paige had a choir solo. When I was 22 and landed my first major lighting project, restoring a historic theater lobby, my father congratulated me by asking if I could also take a quick look at the lighting plan for the family's annual charity house tour. "You're better at this sort of thing than we are," he said. That became the pattern. Every December, my mother and Aunt Denise organized the Bennett Mercer Holiday House Tour and Winter Scholarship Auction in our hometown outside Philadelphia, a glossy event that people in town like to call a family tradition. What they never said out loud was that I was the one who made it look professional. I built the donor website. I drafted the sponsor packets. I handled the lighting for the showcase homes. I designed the event graphics. I stayed up late fixing payment links while my mother took photos in a red coat and posted captions about family, generosity, and grace. Thanksgiving was the first time they forgot to pretend I mattered while I was standing in the room. 2 days later, I saw my mother's Facebook post. A perfectly staged photo of the table, warm candlelight, smiling faces, captioned, "Nothing matters more than having my children home." I wasn't in the picture. Not accidentally cropped. Completely absent. Then I noticed something else. My cousin had uploaded a short story from the far end of the table that night. The clip was only 12 seconds long, shaky and partly blocked by a wine glass, but the audio was clear. My mother saying, "Be grateful you can sit here," my aunt laughing, and me answering, "Oh, good to know." She deleted it the next morning. Too late. I had already saved it. I sat in my apartment with my laptop open and finally asked myself the question I should have asked years earlier. Was I actually loved, or was I simply the easiest person to use? Once that question settled in my mind, everything else became clearer. I called my best friend Tessa Hall. For the first time, I didn't defend my family. I told the full truth. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Nora, they don't panic when they hurt you. They panic when they lose access to you. There's a difference. That sentence changed the entire week. I didn't make an impulsive, dramatic decision in a coffee shop. I made a deliberate one. I opened every folder connected to the holiday fundraiser. I reviewed what belonged to me, what carried my name, which payment systems were tied to my business accounts, and which legal permissions I had given over the years without thinking. Then I drafted one calm, professional email. Effective immediately, I was withdrawing from all planning, design, vendor coordination, web administration, and donor communications related to the Bennett Mercer Holiday House Tour and Winter Scholarship Auction. Any future use of my work, business accounts, images, lighting plans, or my name was unauthorized. I copied the committee chair, the printer, the florist, the venue manager, and the bank processor. Then I blocked my family group chat, turned off my phone, and made another decision at the same time. I would not be returning for Christmas. Have you ever spent years trying to earn tenderness from people who only ever rewarded your usefulness? Because once you recognize that pattern, it becomes almost impossible to ignore. The first person to respond wasn't my mother. It was Paige. Of course it was Paige. She had been trained her entire life to be the soft voice for whatever my mother wanted. Her text arrived 8 minutes after my email went out. "Nora, what are you doing? Mom says you're overreacting and embarrassing everyone." I stared at that word, embarrassing, because that had always been the family rule, hadn't it? Their cruelty remained private. My reaction became public. I wrote back, "No, I'm refusing to keep my work under people who don't respect me." She typed for a moment, 3 dots appeared, then nothing. 30 minutes later, the florist emailed me. She explained that she could no longer process invoices without an authorized replacement because the last 4 years of event billing had been routed through the design management portal connected to my company. The printer wrote next, then the house tour coordinator, then the scholarship treasurer. Every message said some version of the same thing. They had assumed I was leading operations because my name appeared on the planning deck, the donor portal, and the sponsor packet. That was when I realized just how long my family had been using my credibility as part of their brand. My mother hadn't just relied on my work. She had quietly built the entire event's professional reputation on it. Just leaned on me behind the scenes. She had built public trust on top of my work and allowed people to assume I supported everything connected to it. Tessa came over that evening with Thai takeout and a legal pad, because that's the kind of friend she is, the kind who brings food and asks practical questions when your life begins to shift. She works in municipal records and reviews enough nonprofit paperwork to recognize when something doesn't look right. We sat cross-legged on my living room rug, going line by line through old event files, reimbursement summaries, vendor quotes, archived invoices. The longer we reviewed them, the more troubling it became. My Aunt Denise had submitted duplicate reimbursements the year before for the same floral installation under 2 separate budget categories. My mother had used donor hospitality funds for items that clearly were not donor hospitality: salon services, boutique clothing, even a hotel stay the weekend after the event. Because most of the digital records had passed through my systems first, copies had landed in folders linked to my email. Not because I was monitoring anyone, but because I was the one doing the operational work. The most disappointing discovery wasn't even the money. It was realizing that my mother had presented one of my lighting concepts, something I had designed for a restored carriage house display, as Denise's creative idea during sponsor meetings. I found the presentation deck, I found the notes, and I found Denise's small comment in the margin of an exported PDF. "Don't mention Nora unless they ask. Keep it simpler." Keep it simpler. That's an efficient phrase for removing a person while still benefiting from her work. The next morning, I did one more thing. I emailed the committee chair directly, a woman named Eleanor Pike, and explained professionally that I was stepping away and needed my name removed from any fundraising materials immediately. I didn't complain or accuse anyone. I simply attached a list of the assets I controlled and included a transition note. Eleanor responded within 12 minutes. "I'm surprised. Linda said your role this year was minimal." Minimal? I actually laughed out loud. Then the phone calls started. First my mother, then my father, then Paige, followed by 2 family friends who had no real reason to contact me. By evening, my Aunt Denise left a voicemail saying, "You need to stop this stunt before people get the wrong idea." I played that message twice. The wrong idea, not the truth, the wrong idea. So I did something I had never done before. I stopped protecting them from the consequences of their actions. I didn't return the calls. I revoked my business payment credentials from the event site. I moved the archive design files off the shared drive. I notified the web host that the family was no longer authorized to use my commercial templates. Then I sent one final message to the family group chat before muting it completely. Since I should be grateful just to sit at the table, I assume you won't need the daughter whose work built your event. Please direct all future questions to someone you actually value. No profanity, no theatrics, just a clear statement. And it turns out that truth is far louder than people expect when they've spent years depending on your silence. By Monday, concern had turned into panic. My mother texted 6 times before 9 a.m. The first message said, "Call me. This has gone too far." The second said, "People are asking questions." The third said, "Why are you punishing the whole family over a holiday misunderstanding?" That word again, misunderstanding. As if I had somehow misheard an entire room laughing. By noon, it became clear that the real problem wasn't my silence. The problem was that the event itself was starting to wobble publicly. The donor page had been temporarily disabled because the payment processor on file no longer matched the authorized manager. A sponsor wanted clarification about who was now overseeing production. Someone on the committee had noticed that the printed materials listed me as the lead design and operations coordinator, while Linda had recently told people I was barely involved this year. Contradictions tend to make polite people unexpectedly curious. Then my father, Mark, video called me. Against my better judgment, I answered. He wasn't at home. He was standing inside one of the tour properties, a decorated colonial house, with ladders in the background and half-hung garland behind him. His face looked tired, but not apologetic. "Nora," he said, trying to sound calm and reasonable, "your mother is beside herself. We need to sort this out quietly." Quietly. There it was again. Not correctly. Quietly. I asked him one question. "Has anyone apologized to me for Thanksgiving?" He blinked. Behind him, I could hear my Aunt Denise snapping at someone about centerpieces. My father lowered his eyes and said, "That's not the point right now." I almost appreciated the honesty of that answer. It wasn't the point. Their fundraiser was the point. Their reputation was the point. Their public image was the point. I said, "Then I'm not the point either. Not to any of you." He started to respond, but I ended the call. That evening, the Save Thanksgiving clip began circulating without me lifting a finger. I didn't post it. I didn't send it. But small towns have a way of turning deleted things into shared things, especially when the people in them spend the entire year promoting themselves as warm, generous, faith-driven pillars of the community. By Tuesday, Tessa was texting me screenshots from local Facebook comments under my mother's event promotion. Didn't someone say Linda excluded her own daughter at Thanksgiving? Is the family having some kind of issue? Who actually manages the scholarship money? My mother responded the way she always did when control started slipping. She began telling relatives that I was stressed, exhausted, not myself, going through something. It was such a familiar tactic that I almost felt embarrassed for ever believing it before. You don't have to call a woman irrational outright if you can simply suggest she's emotional enough that people shouldn't trust her version of events. Paige texted me late that night. "Mom's crying all day. Aunt Denise says you're trying to destroy the family." I typed back, "No. I'm refusing to keep holding it together for people who only notice me when something breaks." She didn't respond for hours. Then finally, "I didn't know your name was on all of it." That message stayed with me. Paige had benefited from the same system, but maybe she had never understood the structure behind it. Maybe she had never needed to. The next morning, my mother left me a voicemail that clarified everything. Not because it was emotional, but because it was so revealing. She said, "You have no idea how humiliating this is for me. Not how painful, not how wrong, humiliating." That was when I knew exactly what would happen next. They weren't going to reflect. They were going to mobilize. Because in families like mine, shame rarely leads to accountability first. It leads to defense. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed thinking that when they came, they wouldn't really ask, "Why are you hurt?" They would ask, "How dare you stop absorbing the damage?" So let me ask you this. When people say they miss you, do they truly miss you? Or do they miss the role you played in keeping their lives comfortable? They came the following Saturday, just after noon, in the kind of cold weather that makes every knock sound sharper. I was home in thick socks, halfway through reorganizing a supply cabinet when the pounding began. Hard, fast, not neighborly, not a doorbell, more like a demand. Then my mother's voice came through the door. "Nora, open the door right now." My stomach dropped, not from fear, but from recognition. I already knew they hadn't driven 90 minutes to Philadelphia because they suddenly understood what they had done. I looked through the peephole and saw all 4 of them standing on my stoop. Linda in a camel coat, her lipstick already worn at the edges, Mark holding a banker's box filled with papers, Paige tense and pale, and Denise standing slightly behind them with her jaw set, as if this entire situation was somehow my fault. My aunt struck the door with the flat of her hand and shouted, "This has gone far enough." I opened the door with the chain still on. "You need to leave," I said. My mother's face immediately shifted into something urgent and emotional. "We need to talk. Please open the door." Mark lifted the banker's box slightly, as if the paperwork explained everything. Denise interrupted before I could respond. "The committee froze reimbursement approvals. Eleanor thinks there are discrepancies. We just need to clear this up." There it was. Not "we're sorry," not "we were wrong," just "we need to clear this up." I looked at the box and understood immediately. They needed signatures, explanations, endorsements, maybe even someone to take responsibility. My mother lowered her voice. "Please, Nora, not out here." That almost made me laugh. Public humiliation only mattered when it was theirs. I unlatched the chain and let them into the narrow foyer of my row house, but I didn't invite them to sit like guests. I remained standing. They filled the space with cold air, expensive perfume, and the old assumption that eventually I would do what was necessary to restore the family's comfort. Denise spoke first after the door closed. "This ridiculous boundary act has already damaged the auction. Donors are nervous, the committee is suspicious, and people are gossiping because of that stupid clip." I folded my arms. "Interesting that you call my boundary the problem and not what was actually said." My mother stepped closer. "I was joking." "No," I said. "You were telling the truth in public." Paige flinched. My father placed the box on the console table and opened it. Inside were printed budgets, reimbursement forms, vendor contracts, and a stack of sponsor letters. "We just need you to explain that you were still overseeing the transition," he said carefully, "and that those expense issues are administrative errors. Eleanor trusts you." That sentence landed exactly where he intended. Eleanor trusts you, not us. You. In that one line, the entire family system revealed itself. They had come to my door not because they had found their conscience, but because they had run out of credibility to borrow. My mother tried again, softer this time, tears forming right on cue. "Please don't do this to us right before Christmas." I looked at all of them carefully and felt something settle inside me with surprising calm. For years, I had mistaken the moment before confrontation for weakness because my body would shake. But sometimes your body shakes because it knows a door is finally closing behind you. "You didn't come here to talk about Thanksgiving," I said. "You came because your event is collapsing and you want me to crawl back under it and hold up the floor." Denise snapped, "For God's sake, stop being dramatic." I replied, "No, you stop pretending this is love." And that was the moment the room shifted. Because suddenly they understood I was not going to make this simple, private, or consequence-free anymore. My mother sat down without being asked, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were the injured party. My father remained standing near the paperwork. Paige lingered in the doorway between the hall and the living room. Denise stayed on her feet, pacing the way people often do when the facts are not on their side, and they hope movement will look like confidence. Mark slid 3 forms toward me. "If you sign these," he said, "we can verify vendor approvals and release the hold. Then we can deal with the family issues separately." I looked at him for a long moment. That was the line, wasn't it? Fix the public problem first. Discuss the feelings later. I pushed the papers back untouched. No. My mother's voice sharpened immediately. Nora, you are not destroying a scholarship fund because you're upset over a joke. I met her eyes calmly. I'm not destroying anything. I stepped away from something built on dishonesty. Denise laughed harshly. Dishonesty? Don't exaggerate. You were helping the family like everyone else. I turned to her. Should I start with the duplicate floral reimbursements from last year, or the donor hospitality charge that paid for your hotel and spa weekend? The room went completely still. Paige looked at Denise so quickly, I heard her earring tap against her coat collar. My aunt's face actually lost color. My father muttered quietly, Nora. But I wasn't finished. I walked to my desk, pulled out a folder, and placed copies on the coffee table. I have the invoices. I have the payment logs. I have the export trail from the admin system connected to my business email. I also have the sponsor deck, where one of my designs was presented as Denise's concept, with a note saying not to mention me unless someone asked. My mother stood up, furious. You went digging through family records. No, I said evenly. I worked. That's how I found them. That's the part all of you keep forgetting. I'm the one who actually did the work. Paige stepped closer to the table, reading the top page with parted lips. Mom, she said quietly. My mother didn't look at her. Denise recovered first, the way people often do when cornered. They reach for contempt. Everyone shifts expenses, she said. That's how events operate. Not charitable scholarship events, I replied, and not under my name. My father rubbed his forehead. Nothing criminal happened. I looked at him and said the thing I had been holding back since the video call. You knew. His silence answered before his words did. My mother snapped. Mark only knew there were some messy reimbursements. Paige looked from one parent to the other, stunned. You told me Nora had barely anything to do with this year's event. My mother finally looked at her, and in that glance, I saw the entire structure of our family, lies arranged for convenience and defended by whoever benefited most. Denise pointed at me. You're trying to ruin your own mother over paperwork. I laughed once, without humor. No, I'm refusing to rescue a woman who laughed when I was humiliated and then continued using my name to appear respectable. My mother's eyes filled again, but this time the tears looked less controlled and more angry. After everything I did for you. That sentence, I interrupted, is exactly why we're here. Everything with you becomes a debt. Meals are debt. Help is debt. Love becomes debt. And whenever I ask for basic respect, you send me the bill. Denise made one final attempt, the harshest and most honest. People donate because this looks like a good family. Your mother is warm, Paige is charming, and you, she pointed at me. You look serious and competent. You make people trust us. We needed you to act like part of the family. Paige inhaled sharply. My mother snapped, Denise, but it was too late. There it was, completely exposed. Not daughter, asset, optics, credibility. I felt strangely calm. Thank you, I said. That's the most honest thing anyone in this family has said to me in years. Then I told them what I had already done before they arrived. I had sent Eleanor Pike a formal letter resigning from all involvement. Paige asked to meet me for coffee a few days before Christmas. I almost declined. Then I remembered that, unlike the others, she had at least looked shocked by the truth instead of offended by it. So I agreed to meet her at a small bakery in Old City. She arrived without makeup, without excuses, and without the usual Bennett family script. She told me she had spent most of her life believing our mother's version of us was the truth, that I was independent, difficult to read, and perfectly fine on my own, that she was the one who needed extra attention, that the family event was primarily our mother's project with a little help from me. She said, I thought favoritism meant being loved more. I didn't realize it could also mean making you carry things I never had to notice. That was the first apology in the entire situation that didn't sound like self-defense. I told her I wasn't ready to rebuild a sister relationship overnight. She nodded and said, I understand. I just didn't want you to walk away thinking their version of me was the whole story too. That mattered. Sometimes healing isn't a dramatic reunion. Sometimes it's simply one person deciding to stop repeating a lie that benefits them. By New Year's, I had declined every request to just come talk as a family. There was no final movie-style reconciliation in a softly lit living room, no group hug, no miracle holiday dinner where everyone suddenly became emotionally self-aware. What happened instead was smaller, slower, and far more honest. I spent Christmas in Philadelphia with Tessa and 3 friends from work. We ate lasagna from mismatched plates and laughed so much at midnight that my face actually hurt. A board member from the scholarship committee, someone who had seen my transition notes and the way I handled the situation without public theatrics, recommended me for a major winter installation project at a restored opera house. I received the contract in January. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that treated me as if I should be grateful just to have a seat at their table ended up losing an entire local reputation built around holiday prestige because they couldn't manage one simple thing: basic respect. Months later, my mother mailed me a handwritten letter. Not a text message, not a voicemail, a real letter. She wrote that loneliness had forced her to reflect on what public admiration had been doing for her over the years. She admitted she had enjoyed being admired more than she had valued being honest. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, she wrote that she understood if I never trusted her the same way again. That was the first message she had ever sent me that didn't attempt to rush toward a neat resolution. I still haven't decided what role, if any, she will have in my life. Boundaries are not acts of revenge. They are maintenance for self-respect. But I won't pretend the consequences were entirely unsatisfying. Denise lost the board position she had bragged about for a decade. My mother lost the flawless holiday image she had built at my expense. My father lost the illusion that staying quiet made him kind. And Paige lost the comfort of not knowing, which may be the beginning of her becoming a better person. As for me, I lost something too. The final hope that if I worked hard enough, I could earn tenderness from people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Strangely enough, that loss gave me my life back. So here's the lesson I took from all of it. Being the dependable one in a troubled family can feel noble. But if your love is only welcomed when it arrives with labor, you are not being valued. You are being managed. The moment I stopped confusing access with affection, everything changed. So let me ask you honestly, if your own family humiliated you in public and only came running when they needed your name, your work, or your credibility, would you open the door? Our team works continuously to create meaningful and engaging stories that resonate with viewers. We are committed to sharing fictional narratives designed to provide valuable lessons, inspiring messages, and educational insights in a thoughtful and positive way. This story carries an important message about self-respect, emotional awareness, and the value of healthy boundaries. It reminds viewers that genuine love and family support should never come with humiliation, and that personal growth often begins when we choose dignity, wisdom, and honesty.